That memorandum having been handed over there to Pule Mabe, and you could hear what we're going to actually be discussing right now, the tweets by Minister Fikile Mbalula, Askari Testa, they say. The battle between the MKMVA and the Transport Minister is intensifying. You heard it yourself firsthand, not only on the Twitter streets, but also on the ground. And the MKMVA is calling on Mbalula, the call is for Mbalula to be arrested. That's what they're saying. And they're talking as well about his non-performance or dismal performance in the railway system. But joining us for that discussion, we are joined by our politics editor, Sbu Ngalwa. What a day it really has been on the Twitter streets, and you were just listening in to that comment there by the MKMVA, Mbalula Askari Testa. So literally sounding like they are on their wits' end, also following the Twitter war that is happening. But from your political eye and from feet on the ground, what exactly is happening inside the ANC? What is going on between Minister Fikile Mbalula and the MKMVA?
Look, Tammy, I'll start this way. There are two things at play here. The first one being that there are legitimate concerns of the military veterans of the ANC and also of other former liberation movements, and that relates to issues of their welfare, that relates to issues of repatriation of bodies of those who died in exile and were buried in exile, that relates to issues of compensation, but it also relates to issues of money that had been organized and raised for their benefit, in terms of money that was put in a trust and money that subsequently disappeared. Now that is the legitimate issue, and those are the legitimate issues of the military veterans.
And who are they blaming for the disappearance of that money?
Look, there is an ongoing fight, particularly, which is what I was coming to, in terms of, we saw Kebima Patso, who represents the MKMVA, but there is also a splinter group which is called the MK Council, who regard themselves as the legitimate members of the former MK. And that fight has to do with how the affairs of the MKMVA have been run. Actually, Kebima Patso, there was a forensic report years ago which found that they could not account for money that had been put in the trust for military veterans. So the one aspect about those concerns, that's one, that's a legitimate one. But there's also the political fight, which is at play here. If you see these marches, there were marches to Lutuli House, there were marches by the very same grouping to the Zondo Commission, and the reality is, regardless of what Kebima Patso says, you cannot divorce Kebima Patso from the factional politics of the ANC. The MKMVA, as led by Kebima Patso, is aligned to the Secretary General of the ANC, Makashule, and by extension to the former president, Jacob Zuma. So, which in a way explains why you see now these machinations by the MKMVA suddenly being vocal, marching to the Premier, marching to the union buildings, demanding that Zondo steps down. Now all of those are intertwined, because Ace Makashule, Jacob Zuma still form part of an ANC faction. Now you have an MK Council on the other hand, which regards itself as legitimate members of the ANC. Now these are guys who had gone, there was a separate splinter group, in fact in 2007, ahead of Nasrec. And Jacob Zuma went to that conference at Nasrec, despite the divisions where he was seen to have endorsed it. Now that's the conference which also confirmed Mapatso as their leader. But there's another grouping which calls themselves the MK Council. Now those are the leaders of the ANC that have come out in recent years, in recent times, to actually call the MKMVA into order and to actually pledge their support to the efforts that are being made by President Ramaphosa. So at play, I know I took a long route to get to this point, at play here, it's ANC factional politics, but more than anything, it shows you that we are now at a point where I would say issues are reaching a fever pitch, as you can see that there are movements by the SIU, the NPA, and the Commission.
And perhaps that's my next question. Why now? Why this specific timing? Because we know these are pre-existing issues of tensions and factions within the governing party. But why now? What are the circumstances in South Africa's environment and politics that have brought this once again to the fore and to the fever pitch that we see it escalating to?
So that has to do with what is happening in the country. We've seen a lot of movement from law enforcement agencies. We've seen that preemptive strike by the ANC's Secretary General, where he confirmed to independent newspapers that he is awaiting a warrant of arrest. But at that time, no one could confirm a warrant of arrest, not even himself. He was talking of rumors. Now, to me, that seemed like a preemptive strike where he knows that something is coming. Yes, there has been damning evidence that has been laid against the former premier of Free State at the Zondo Commission. In fact, even today at 2 p.m. we'll have the former Housing MEC, former Agriculture MEC, former Minister of Minerals, Musebenzi Zwane, appearing before the commission. And the last time he was there, he said most of the wrong decisions that they took were taken at the executive level. And the executive, who's the head of the executive, is the premier. Now, we also know from the Zondo Commission that no less than 34 witnesses have delivered damning evidence against the former President Zuma, which perhaps explains why there's that dilly-dallying and that egg dance around the issue of his appearance, whether he's appearing or not, which I do not believe is going to happen. So all of those things are at play.
And I guess also there's the added pressure that now, the testimonies given at the State Capture Commission can now actually be used, in the court of law. So that really does add further pressure. You're not just going there to recount a story and to say what happens, but you could in some ways be incriminating yourself. But yeah.
Certainly, Tammy. Actually, from the last we heard, when Vincent Smith, before he was arrested, he was asked a question, and he says, look, I've been advised by my lawyers not to say anything as I could incriminate myself. In fact, Zuma's lawyers have written to the commission to say that Zuma would, at the time, review his further participation in the commission, owing to the fact that the regulations of the commission had changed, in that the commission can now take their evidence, hand it over to law enforcement agencies for them to investigate further. So obviously, whatever you say at the commission now can and will be used against you in a court of law. So that is why you have those jitters on the part of Jacob Zuma. He has been on the record in that regard, Tammy.
And talking about that, I mean, there has been a proposition that has been put on the table by Public Protector that those who come forward to give evidence regarding cases of corruption, that there be some sort of an indemnity for them. Do you think that would help? I mean, is that something that
some corruption indemnity?
Yeah, some sort of a corruption indemnity, almost like a TRC opportunity where people can come clean and yet not be held accountable for their part in it.
Personally, I think it's a problematic call for the simple reason that if you look, for instance, at an organization like, I think it was Outer that recently produced their corruption index, which is looking at trends of corruption. I think it's corruption, either Corruption Watch or Outer. That corruption index actually showed the levels of corruption during the lockdown and the types of corruption. And this is petty. It's not petty. It can regard petty corruption if you compare it to the billions that have been stolen. Now, this relates to police asking for bribes at security checkpoints. That was actually topping the list. The breaking of the law. Now, it goes down to that level. So if you're going to come up with an amnesty, where are you going to start and where are you going to end? So that amnesty to me appears like some deal to cater for the political elite. Because the reality is that if laws have been broken, someone must account. You can have a TRC up to what point? So if you have a TRC now, a corruption TRC now, when again will you have another one? When will those who are responsible for the plunder and the looting of state resources be held to account?
Do you think that what we're seeing now, unfolding with Mbalula, the MKMVA, is there panic in the ANC camp? Are these just the ramifications of panic all round?
Look, I'm sure there is panic, but the other point I didn't make earlier time when I was talking about the movements that we've been seeing from law enforcement agencies, the reality is that the lockdown period has kind of exposed also President Ramaphosa as well. Particularly, well, not just to South Africans, not just to business, not just to other stakeholders, but also within the ANC, because there are those who feel that the ANC's leadership is there for the taking, who feel that the president's ambivalence during the lockdown period, where he was not seen to be strong enough, actually created fertile ground for them to want to mobilize for the next conference. And the next conference of the ANC is in 2022. Now, that is just around the corner, to be considering that all attention next year will be on local government election as soon as they emerge from that, and then there's a conference. So there is that element at play. So obviously, if you look at Mbalula's tweet, which he has since deleted. There was one where he mentioned also President Zuma and all of them. That tells you that the ANC camps, ANC factions are at play, and ANC factions are actually have found fertile ground to fight for the control of the ANC. At the heart of all of this, if you remove all the obfuscation and all the destruction, the reality is that this is the fight for control of the ANC and by extension the control of the state and influencing law enforcement agencies.
Could this be a crumbling of Mashatile's unity?
Well, look, the reality is that every ANC leader talks of unity, and unity is not just in words or it is in display, but the reality is whatever unity that President Ramaphosa spoke about at Nasrec, whatever unified ANC that he wanted to see, that has not been realized, and it doesn't look like that will be realized in time for the next conference.
Let's pause just for a moment and go back to the MKMVA and Mbalula, who is responding to the memorandum that was handed to him just shortly.